What's up, everybody? Big Herc 916, getting down with Fresh Out. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, man. Quit bullshitting. Let's blow this thing up. I'm here with my good friend Chico, man. We kicking game. And man, we got some good stories to share with you guys. And I want to get some background information on my man for you guys and let you know where he's from. Chico, tell the people a little bit about, man, where you're from and how you grew up.
Yeah, man. So Chico, that's what my friends call me. You know, everybody calls me that. Professionally, people call me Lewis. I'm named after my father. My father was in the band Confunction, and he's originally from Vallejo, California. So I was born in Vallejo, California.
V-Town?
Yeah, man, up in the Bay. And was born there. My mother's from Washington, D.C., but I primarily grew up in Atlanta. When I was about 11 years old, we moved from L.A. We lived in Southern California at the time. So we used to live up in Fremont, Oakland area. Then we moved down to the Los Angeles area. And when I was about 11, I moved to Atlanta. And Atlanta is where I grew up. You know, I kind of lived there from 11 to 27 years old. So I did most of my growing there. So, but yeah, man, I grew up in Atlanta. It was kind of an interesting time, man. With both my parents kind of being in the music business, you know, my dad was in the band Confunction. They broke up in '86, and then my mother in the late '80s went to Capitol Records, to Busted Records, which was MC Hammer's record label. It was kind of an interesting time to grow up, man, because we got an opportunity to travel a lot, to see a lot, to meet a lot of people, see a lot of business firsthand. You know, my parents took us everywhere, so we'd sit in their office. You know, we'd go to studio sessions. You know, so it was really a cool time. And then what actually ended up happening was when my mother ended up leaving Busted Records, we had friends, and my mother had friends and colleagues that were all going to Atlanta. So we went to Atlanta, had a promotional company, used to promote a lot of the artists, you know, and that was a cool time because that was '94. So it was unique, you know, coming out of Southern California and going to Georgia. You know, at the time, it's like complete culture shock. You know what I mean? But it was a good time to grow up. Especially that was 2 years before the Olympics came, you know, so if you lived in Atlanta before the Olympics and you saw it after the Olympics, it completely transformed the way the city looked and operated. And for the music business, you know, at the time, Atlanta was coming into like the musical heyday, you know, and
that was like what Outkast, Goody Mob, and
oddly enough, what's funny about that is one of the first accounts my mother had was LaFace Records, and Outkast was new, and that was like brand new Outkast. And, you know, oddly enough, even though, you know, Southern music wasn't as popular at the time, you know, Outkast was one of those things that instantly resonated. So, you know, it was like the minute you heard that, you were like, okay, this is going somewhere. And so, you know, for us, man, it was cool. They used to do Freaknik back in the day. That's when Freaknik was going on.
Yeah, that's right. Man. They still had Freaknik.
Yeah, man. So it was wild to.
Was that like the Brat back then too, or was she?
Yeah. So that was So Def. That was with Jermaine Dupri and So Def and the Brat and Criss Cross and all that. And it's funny because I remember before we moved to Atlanta, man. I remember I had a phase. There's a photo floating around of me somewhere at a cookout with my shorts on backwards. No joke. You know what I mean? Criss Cross had us caught up. You know. But yeah, man. So that was kind of cool, man. We got down there, and you know, as I got into my teens and into my early 20s, it really gave me an opportunity to see a lot of business and music business firsthand. You know, there's a tremendous amount of popular recording studios there in Atlanta. A lot of recording was taking place in Atlanta. So even though people might be from California or they might be from New York, going there, if they had a publishing deal or they just write and produce, or if they're going there to make an album, you know, that's where a lot of that took place. So, you know, we really got to see a lot of that firsthand, and you know, it was a great experience, you know, growing up. I mean,
with that, during that time, was that like one of the major, would you say, shifting points where a lot of the black entertainment kind of converged on Atlanta and started really building? Because today, Georgia's one of the biggest places for shooting movies, for black production, and
that was a big tipping point, man. Because I remember just bugging out, like going down there, and you know, my mother's making $100,000 back then, and then getting down there and then realizing man, you could live good on like 40 grand when we got there. Like this was like, okay, this is, the South was just completely different cost wise. And, a lot of people at one point, Atlanta was going to be like this kind of third hub. And instead of building mega offices and moving headquarters there, a lot of big labels started moving production companies, right? They'll have a production company, they'll build a studio, they started signing people, which I kind of get because, it's a scenario where if I'm in New York or I'm in California, there's a finite amount of studios, but I can encourage people to go to a different hub and record and the budget goes a lot farther when you're living down there. I think that's why it really kind of caught on. But a lot of people went down there thinking, I'm going to have an office here. And a lot of those companies didn't really do that. The headquarters is still New York and LA.
Yeah.
So you'll see a lot of people in Atlanta, but years back, it wasn't uncommon for somebody to be from Atlanta but get signed in New York or Los Angeles. They didn't get their deal in Atlanta, right? But Atlanta was this kind of, hotbed for music and creativity, and which was great because then you got a lot of people kind of converging on Atlanta to collaborate with people. And that kind of created a huge level of synergy. And I think a lot of what you're seeing now was a result of that early 90s shift towards, the South being this musical hub.
Yeah, because I was just trying to put a pulse on, when you said Outkast, and I remember that was like the early 90s?
Yeah, like we're coming up on like 94, 95, right? So like we're in that realm because I think I came there in like late 94.
Okay. Yeah.
And so this is right around that time because remember, at the time when I first got down there were really popular groups. I mean, there were some from Atlanta, but there were groups out of Memphis and rappers. I won't get real old, but it was like Player Fly, and Kingpin, Skinny Pimp, and then there were people
was
from
3-6 Mafia around that time.
3-6 Mafia, yeah, they were kind of in their heyday, kind of in that like mid to like late 90s. Ludacris came, some years kind of towards the end of that decade.
Right, yeah.
And but what's interesting is they all had their own sound, but living on the coasts before, because I lived in Maryland and then we lived in California, the South was heavily unrepresented. So if you went down there at the time, it was a really interesting time to see kind of a third market really, really explode. I mean, there were huge independent artists from down there. Luke was doing well, and Luke was a major artist, but I mean, there were independent artists like, Master P and people like that. I mean, these people were doing very well on their own, So when we got down there, it was kind of a wide open market because it was like, man, if you promoted artists, I mean, there were artists to promote, but these artists had money. These independent artists actually had bread because they're selling records and they're not getting the representation from like the majors. So they're independent. They have cash. They can pay.
Well, one thing I noticed too that was different, like you said, like Atlanta, the Missouri, Mississippi, they support their own.
Yeah.
Where like, in Cal, it's so competitive on West Coast, like people, they don't really get behind you where they got like down south, like almost like a circuit where you can do little clubs and be balling because people will buy local artist stuff. So they buy local.
It's like that old Chitlin Circuit scenario where they used to talk about, you used to be able to do that in the South. And it's interesting because, I mean, that's very true. I mean, think about it. If you're an artist down there and you're not the biggest artist in the world, but you telling me you don't have time 3 nights a week to go pick up 5 or 10 grand a night from a nightclub? I mean, that's a good living. I don't know if anybody can do math, but if you're making 15 grand a week, that's 60 grand a month. Yeah. That goes a long way when it's all cash. So it's a situation where back then artists kind of had to do that because there was really not a lot of love from the East Coast, in the northern portions, and there really wasn't any love on the West Coast for Southern artists. So we would get down there and, we just met tons and tons of independent artists that actually did okay on their own, who many of which went on to sign deals and become huge artists, So yeah, that went, for years. And then, I just happened to be, I had a guy that that my mother actually introduced me to when I was young. My father had passed. My father was actually killed in a home invasion when I was about 14, and that was in the Stone Mountain area. So, after that, and I got into just a little bit of trouble, nothing crazy, but I think my mother feared I was going to go off the deep end and, get real caught up in a bunch of stuff, So we had a good friend who kind of stepped in as a mentor to me. He was about 8 years older than me and very successful gentleman. in the communications business, and really, really sharp guy. And we got into a couple of ventures together, one of which was a recording facility. And then these are the gentlemen who kind of talked me into considering real estate. You know, we would meet people all the time. I mean, you know, in Atlanta, you have people who are coming here to record. You have some guys who, you know, who do very well, and you know, they're making good money. They're wanting to invest. We knew ball players who wanted to invest. So these gentlemen kind of started this construction company and really kind of roped me into leaving kind of my musical roots as an everyday scenario and going into real estate, and that's what I did for some time. You know, every now and then, you know, we still have some things that we get, you know, residuals from, or deals that have to be negotiated, or, you know, people come to me, I'm still to my mother to this day, you know, we'll negotiate deal structure for people. But that really kind of got me from that segue from music kind of into other areas of business. And so that really diversified me a lot, I think, early in my real estate career, and where I've still kind of focused a lot of my time today.
And what advice would you give the young men out there that are, you know, looking to find their entrepreneurial roots, or, you know, trying to branch out and become, you know, a business owner, or, you know, start a career in entertainment?
You know, so I'll just say specifically in entertainment, start with business. Start with business. If you can get someone's contract or contracts, read and learn those first, the way you would read and learn the manual to recording equipment, or the way you would write records, then you pretty much already know the structure of the deals that are going to come your way.
That's right.
So always start with the business. You know, I think music is no different than being successful at anything else. There's a finite and a very small amount of people that are going to be at the top of that pyramid. The vast majority of everyone else will be, I guess, like a working musician. You know, I think people forget the record industry is millions of jobs. Everybody's thinking of the 20 artists they know of, but there's millions of jobs in the record business. You know, there's people that do all sorts of stuff. There's people that do outside deal negotiation, like I do, like my mother does. She's well seasoned in that realm, right? There's people who are accountants specifically for labels. You know, they want to be in the music business, but their knack is math. You know, so I just remind people that if you want to be in the music business, you can have almost any job you could have anywhere else that orientates on the entertainment industry. But if you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to know the business first. You have to know the business, you have to know the contracts, and you have to know who's making the decisions. Because the biggest problem in most business, especially where there's a lot of money involved, is there's a lot of layers of bureaucracy, and there's a lot of layers of people who you really don't always have to deal with. And I think a lot of times when people are complaining about the way something didn't go, 9 times out of 10, they were a little too far from the source.
That's a great advice, man, because like a lot of people, they're shooting for the fame first, and they're not really looking for, you know, maybe the Lamborghini and Ferrari rather than, you know, the business side of it. But that's a great way, is to reverse engineer that contract, or study the business
start
side,
backwards.
And then by the time you start making your deals, you can't, you know, you can't be hoodwinked. Somebody won't go over you. So.
You know, it's funny. You know, they say now the internet is filled with information but void of knowledge, right? And that's very true, because now think about it. Everybody has everything at everyone's fingertips. I see people being funny, taking a picture of a dollar amount on Twitter, some artist, and they snap part of a page of their contract. That page probably took a couple of grand to draft. That's a high quality piece of a contract you might want to read, right? Yeah. I mean, there's so much information on the internet, and you can, I mean, in today's world, you could just reach out to people. You can reach out to people and ask them, hey, can I have a blank version of, like, you know, can you find me that, you know? Or you can get good legal counsel. I think one problem people have is, and this is any business, they're not necessarily starting with the right guidance. But in something that is very contract heavy, start with an attorney, you know, and spend some money if you can. Get an attorney that you know represents someone else who is probably more notable than you are. Because they're not going to do double work. A lot of times the agreements that you need to know, or the things you need to know, you're going to learn, and that's going to really expedite your ability to I don't want to say get ripped off, but you want to be as savvy as possible, because remember, it's the other side's job to put you in a deal that benefits them.
That's right.
It's their job.
Yeah.
You know, it's your job to know when to push back. And everybody acts like, well, somebody should have told me. And it's like, well, you know, you're grown, you know?
Yeah, you coming into an arena, you got to know the game.
You got to know the game.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, that's something I think a lot of young people need to hear. Yeah. And, the music industry, everybody's so, they're fascinated with it because we see it all over the place now, especially on social media. So I think that's great advice. And of course, real estate, a lot of guys, they're always looking at real estate as the next thing. You see, Grant Cardone, all these people talking about real estate and investing. So those are two very impacted areas that a lot of young people are interested in.
Yeah, and the real estate thing is interesting because, I've been involved in real estate for now, this would be my 17th or 18th year. And it's interesting because people all oversimplify it. They oversimplify real estate the way they oversimplify the music business, right? Everybody thinks, well, all I got to do. And I'm like, well, if you plan to be successful, it's going to take a little more work than you think. For instance, almost every month someone comes to me with a very lucrative job. They're very well trained in something. They might be an engineer, they might be a nurse, they might be something like a radiology tech. And they'll say to me, hey, well, you've been really active in different associations and different real estate organizations. I want to do that. And I'm like, okay, well, why do you want to do that? Oh, because I want to make money. I said, well, honestly, if you want to make money, what's probably better off than you thinking you're going to completely recalibrate your life and completely start from scratch and now go out and be self-employed is, why don't you utilize some of the revenue from the job you have that's paying you well? And there's ways for you to buy real estate, buy the right things, build a portfolio, and then have some residual income where you're not spread thin. Everybody, I think television maybe oversimplifies it. They see these TV shows and they think the job is opening doors and cashing checks, and it's a lot more involved in that. And so I think one problem we have today, particularly with the internet and the way young people receive information, is everything's oversimplified. Everything's oversimplified. Everything seems like, oh, I can just go do that.
Well, sign up for that program and be making 10 grand a month.
Right.
Like, yeah,
and it doesn't work. And it can. There's always good information in a lot of programs people sell. But if it was that simple, would they tell you? If they could truly keep that, if they could keep that money to themselves, if they only got up an hour earlier, would they really give it away? So I don't knock a lot of programs because I always tell people in everything you go do and participate in, there's a percentage of it that is solid information. Will people implement it? That's the issue, you know. So in today's world, you think about young people, and I know where my shortcomings are, and they mostly, and I work on them, but I have to work on it. It's discipline, it's focus, it's these things of really, really sticking to a task. But I tell people, once you master that, you can be successful in anything. I mean, if you wanted to go make skateboards tomorrow, if you're as focused on that as you were anything else you're passionate about, you'd be just fine.
You're right. Hey, man, that's great advice. Hey, there you have it. Big Herc 916 and Chico getting down on Fresh Out. Stop walking around with a crusty butt, smelly ball sack, and a funky hoo-ha. Big Herc said, wash that ass. Pick you up a t-shirt at freshoutseries.com.